Thank you very much. And thank you for coming back. A little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we're going to meet with whoever would like to meet with us, and then maybe you can take a look at some of the displays we have downstairs in the Blue Room, have a little bit of orange-infused water and a few other things. But for some of you that may need an easier access, the handicapped access to the downstairs, we'll have somebody available to show you where that is. And as a matter of fact, it's the young man right there with the blue tie on. Just see Palmer and he'll direct you to the area you need to go. Okay? Good. The first piece of music, interesting to say the least. Manchester Cornet Band, another David L. Downing arrangement, one that Paul Mayberry ferreted out a long, long time ago. Always been a great, great fan of that one, just with its uniqueness in using the folk tunes of the day and what have you. But just what was it for? Why did they do it? My inkling is it could certainly have been meant for the prelude or overture to a minstrel show or something along those lines. But just a great piece of music. One of the other things that we've had pleasure doing over the years is actually educating people on what was called the American Brass Band movement. It began in America about 1835, and it was in the hubs of Boston, New York, Pittsburgh, and other places that we saw this start to occur, but especially in the Boston area. The instrument manufacturing that was going on, plus also the capable playing of the performers, was something to certainly behold. We've done numerous presentations on that initiative with young musicians and trying to instill and make them understand there is important music in 19th century band literature. And we've done numerous presentations and performances, such as with the Company of Military Historians, the International Trumpet Guild, to name a few, and also, of course, here at IUP, who has given us tremendous opportunity, and especially under the capable leadership and guidance of Dr. Kevin Eisensmith. And we are greatly indebted for everything that they've done for us. The movement itself helped the American people express themselves. It was representative of them, and it was absolutely so integral to their daily life. This band was there for their birth, their death, their patriotic rallies, their dances, or just simply gatherings. It was integral to their life. It also allowed them to present the old world where they had come from, while giving the medium to express themselves as Americans, the new world. It has direct ties to military function, performed side by side with the town's militia. This next piece is indicative of that. Written by John Holloway, the blues, or the Winslow blues, if you will. Could you imagine what you're about to hear? They would actually do parading, of course, but also maneuvers to pieces such as this. But the other thing that this was doing, this whole movement, especially in the 1830s and 40s, it was developing and ultimately giving us the cornet virtuoso that came to fruition in great strides in the late 19th century. The first keyed bugle, such as Ned Kendall and the rest of them, and then the cornet. This arrangement by Paul Mayberry, who again I thank for his superb skills and long-standing friendship, is indicative, again, of that usage, and more importantly, that brass band culture in the 1830s and 1840s. So, let me introduce the professor. He will be ably assisted by the band, of course, but also his companions ultimately in E-flat cornet section. Ladies and gentlemen, we certainly hope you enjoy Dr. Kevin Eisensmith and his solo work on the Winslow Blues Quick Step. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Where do I begin? Well, I'll start with a fellow that many, many years ago believed in what he saw and heard. His name was John Lasher. He was the superintendent. Eventually, John Lasher would proclaim the Wildcat Regiment Band as the superintendent's own. We were given privilege that I can only describe to you if I would keep you here another hour, which I won't. But we had the ability to perform on the battlefield at certain sites with audience and also quite privately to take care of what we needed to do. I personally, and I know this band will never forget the occasions on Little Round Top and a few other places next to the Wildcat Memorial in the Peach Orchard and a few other areas adjacent to that, and of course, the Pennsylvania Memorial. Nothing more fitting than to see a Pennsylvania band playing there, and we were given that opportunity on numerous occasions. So we thank him for his vision, which still stands today, by the way. When you see the change in landscape, when you see the improvements that have been made, it was that management plan that he put into effect. And this band supported that from day one. It is truly a remarkable place, and it is changing daily. Evangelina Rubalcava, Mike Weiss, both showing us the park and giving us opportunities to interpret it. The Gettysburg Foundation, Joanne Hanley, and of course, a young lady by the name of Susan Corbett. Susan and I were able to work very closely when we were announced that we would be the band to perform for the opening of the brand new Visitor Center. And believe me, it was one tremendous event. I also distinctly remember one day after an election that the phone rang and I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. And it said, BJ, and I said, yes, Sue Corbett, remember me? Yes, ma'am, I do. And that is when she contracted us and asked us if we would indeed play for her husband, the new governor of Pennsylvania, at his inauguration. So what a distinct honor. Bill Aldrich. If you don't know this man, you need to know him. He's a who's who when it comes to education, engineering, United States military, service, retired general, but a person who is so community-minded and so embedded into what he feels is for the betterment of mankind. He was directly involved in the train station, the formation, the purchase, the trying to rehabilitate where Lincoln had come that day in 1863. But he also remained a staunch supporter of the National Park Service and, of course, the Gettysburg Foundation. But I will tell you that when money was lean, Gettysburg still got this band because he was so willing to open his personal checking account to make sure we were there for the audiences at Gettysburg. What else can I tell you about this guy? Except, please welcome him to Indiana. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bill Aldrich. It was Bill that found this piece of music in the National Park Service archives at Gettysburg entitled The Dirge. And he got it to us, and Kenton Scott took it from there, arranging it for band. What does this piece that we hear and see, what does it actually mean to this band? In July of 1997, we had the distinct honor of being part of a formal military funeral. The burial was that of a Civil War soldier. Yes, a Civil War soldier, whose remains had been found in 1996 in the famed railroad cut the first day's area of the battlefield. We marched the very path that Lincoln and the others used on November 19, 1863, when the National Cemetery was consecrated. This piece of music you're about to hear was specifically written and performed for that occasion. We also used this music to introduce people to a person by the name of Elizabeth Thorne. Does anybody know who she is? Elizabeth Thorne lived in the gatehouse of the cemetery. She and her husband were the caretakers. On July 1st of 1863, heard a knock on a door. She finds, as she wrote in her memoir, a man with straps on his shoulder. And the man is asking her, "Can you tell me, is there someone here that can show me where the roads are that lead in and out of this town?" She looked at him and said, "I can." He said, "No, ma'am, you don't understand. This is a very dangerous thing." She said, "I'm aware of that. Do you have anybody?" So she just candidly looked at him and basically told him this: "Unless you want a babbling 2-year-old that won't even understand you, or you want my father who speaks only German, I'm pretty much your best choice here." And so she took her calico, puts it over her head, and takes him down over the field. And a regimental band that's with the artillery that is forming on the ridge sees her. They immediately kick up a little ditty for Elizabeth Thorne. Music, a place and time. What you also don't probably know about Elizabeth is that she survives it. She will bury over 120 Union soldiers by herself in that cemetery. Elizabeth Thorne was also 6 months pregnant at the time. She is a remarkable human being. You can visit her today in that National Cemetery, and a beautiful bronze statue by Ron Tunison as it sits. These are the stories you need to know. And we've used this music to do this. But of course, the actual consecration of the ground. November 19th, it was somewhat of a cloudy day, but it wasn't raining. Everybody had gathered at the town square. The president looked rather awkward. He was actually on a horse that was maybe too small for him. And some were actually, the newspaper reporters were saying his gauntlets were making him look awkward. Over tens of thousands of people had again come on this town. They had no idea what to do with everybody. But as the cannon sounds, it is time to get the parade going and the procession to the National Cemetery, where they will consecrate that ground. They said, the one reporter said, and as the cannon went off, the bands struck up in a beautiful discord and confusion. And the dirge and the Dead March were the tune. Once reaching there, music would be done. The Marine Band will play Old Hundred. Edward Everett will get up and give a 2-hour oration. You think I'm bad? Try that one. He sits down, and another piece of music is, of course, played, and a prayer. Then the President of the United States is introduced, and he delivers a speech that he finishes in minutes. The music to follow is this dirge, written by Alfred Delaney and words created by Percival. They will be accompanied, who is they? They is a chorus of people that are taken from all of the churches in the Gettysburg area, assembled here. And they will be accompanied on this piece by Bergfield's band out of Philadelphia. I don't think there's anything else I need to say. Let's listen to the dirge that was used on November 19th, 1863 at the consecration of the National Cemetery. I hope you're relatively comfortable. But I have to tell you the truth again, since my conscience got me halfway through that gorgeous piece of music. But there was this lighter thing that came into my mind, and it was my mother. And we were sitting in Penns Manor High School auditorium, where my father taught. And as a young man, sitting next to my mother, I was going through, and my sister was there, of course, God bless her. But I think we were at a band concert, and I must have asked the question, "Are we done yet?" Or my mother saying, "Boy, why does he have to play all this long hair stuff?" She knew just the right words to get him started. What a wonderful person. Playing hymns and other sacred music has always been a necessity, and more importantly, a privilege to this group. Again, Little Round Top, Sunday mornings all by ourselves, joined by special friends, John, Bill, and others. And just to sit there and listen. I remember the Rollses always coming and listening. I remember the Burnses at some point coming and listening. They were all cherished people that related well to this band. Dave and Meg Burns loved this band so much that they donated an instrument that was actually played by his great-grandfather during the American Civil War. As a matter of fact, Rod Sarowine is playing that very instrument today. These are the associations that this band has grown over the years. Salem and Dunkirk Church, tremendous places. Harper's Ferry, John Brown's Fort, the National Cemeteries. But let me tell you about a little place called Sharpsburg, Maryland. Antietam pretty much became our second home. In 1992, there was a young lady that believed in us. She saw us, since we had been invited for the Memorial Day program, had no idea that we would be invited back that September to play, and we did. Marion Gale invited us into her home to show us her historic place where Dr. Biggs, the famed surgeon and physician, lived. And from that point on, it was pure magic. The Gales, Sid, Marion, Andrew, Peter, and Molly, who, by the way, got married last weekend. I still can't believe that. They've been there with us from the beginning. You have to understand that when we showed up at Sharpsburg, this was no minor thing. We took over their entire house, completely filled the bank parking lot with cars, and Sid needed to make sure that there was at least 15 pounds of potato salad ready with other things that they would feed us. Sooner or later, Joe and Susie Nally would come into the fray, and we were fed like kings and just treated like dignitaries. As a matter of fact, the Gales saw to it that we were proclaimed citizens of Sharpsburg, and you can see that proclamation downstairs. Privileges, memories, so many wonderful people. But there is one place in particular besides Dunkirk Church, and it's the barn. It's the Muma farm. It burned during the battle, but a fellow by the name of Bob Murphy, who transplanted himself from Western Pennsylvania, became a battlefield guide. He and his wife, Robin, are active in the community, but always helped us achieve what we wanted, such as playing at historic spots like this. But Bob had a knack for theatrics and to making the moment really count. Oh, is he back there somewhere?
No, he left.
Okay. Can you tell which one Bob is? When we played in the barn, you wouldn't have believed the acoustics, number one. But number two, if you opened the back doors of the frame of the barn, which he would do, I had a full vista of the approach of the famed Irish Brigade as they came across the field on their pursuit of the sunken road. Horrific activity that occurred there. You're talking about men who, when formed into a line of battle, made sure they ruffled through their haversacks to make sure the alcohol, the cards, and everything else associated with Satan was gone, just in case it was their day to meet their Maker. And then the dashing picture of Father Corby as he proceeds in front of them on horseback and gives every one of them absolution before they step off. Can you imagine this? Irishmen clutching their musket in one hand and rosary beads in the other. That's what he did to me, because he knew I knew the story. But as we're playing, I had this full view in front of me. Nothing more touching than this next piece. We call it Led by the Spirit. Got to be honest with you, I was first inspired by this piece by my niece, who played it on church organ many years ago. And then after finally figuring out this was a traditional Irish tune, and one of them even called the Star of the County down, but played in a form of sacred music and hymn, it's pretty tough to beat. Ladies and gentlemen, Led by the Spirit.
It's a wonderful day for us to think back to things that we've done with this band. And I have a very clear memory of when this band packed up a bus one evening, probably after work, because some of the guys are working, heading down Interstate 70 to Kentucky to play in a music festival. And in order to make that long, arduous trip, we pulled that 54-passenger bus right up the Main Street, Broad Avenue of North Belle Vernon, Pennsylvania. That's so we could pick up some gummy fudge. Gummy fudge and minced ham sandwiches. We were all fortified with gummy fudge, and off we went to Kentucky. Gummy, we appreciate the way you've fed this band for most of those 25 years. Gummy is my mother-in-law, Nell Valdesari, but we all know her as Gummy. I have another memory. Somewhere along the line, we thought it would be a good idea, since many of us in our younger days had young sons, 9, 10, 11 years old, thought it would be a good idea to turn them into drummer boys. So we foraged around, looked for wooden drum shells, and we put rope tension heads on them, found drumsticks for them, uniforms, figured out that you could get pretty good-looking black shoes at a women's shoe store for these kids, and you had to change them, of course, every couple of months. So we ended up with 6 drummer boys that traveled with the band. And as being the father of 2 of those drummer boys, I tell you, it was a real privilege and honor to have them travel with us. I have memories of seeing a big pile of uniforms and drumsticks and music and drums in the middle of the room, but they always got to where they were supposed to be at the right time, and we appreciated having them with us. So Don Ament, who you met, his son Matt was one of our drummer boys. Jonathan McDowell, who was the son of Dr. Ed McDowell, was one of the drummer boys. We had Michael Murphy, the son of Bob Murphy, in our percussion section. I hope I don't forget anybody here. I got 3 more, right? B.J. Pino, who has graduated to our alto section, was one of our original drummer boys. My son Joe, who was here but had to leave, he was one of our drummer boys, and my son Nick, who graduated to our percussion section. So we appreciate all the contributions that those boys made to the band. Amazing Grace has become a real favorite American hymn, although it's really written by a British composer, John Newton. We've played this hymn many, many times in many places, but the most memorable place for us to have played it at was on Little Round Top, up on the 12th New York Monument, early on a Sunday morning. We made these annual trips to Gettysburg, and we were fortunate that Dr. Lasher, who was then the superintendent of the Gettysburg National Battle Park, invited us to use that facility. Amazing Grace was one of his favorite hymns, and we got a wonderful message from him within the last couple of days, sending his regrets for not being able to be here today. But he admitted that he put in his will that Amazing Grace was to be played at his funeral, although he says it won't sound the same. So for Dr. Lasher, Gummy, and everybody else out there, Amazing Grace.
Well, we made it. And again, I thank you for your patience and sticking this out with us. We end with the beginning. The first two pieces that you will hear in this next marching segment of Patriotic Airs and Favorite Quick Steps were first played by us in Sharpsburg, Maryland in September of 1992. Our first event as the Wildcat Regiment Band. It indeed was quite a day. Never had I seen my father feeling so good, even amidst all of his medical issues, of being able to march down that street with a line of infantry behind him that, to a tune that as a kid he grew up with playing in the Beyer Band, a tune that transcended time from the 19th to the 20th century, written by Claudio Graffola and simply known as Washington Grays. We're going to have to reach deep to get to these segments. They're tough, but they're ready to play them. It is, however, necessary for me again to thank those that encouraged this band and, more importantly, taught us how to do this at the highest level. So please bear with me, and my apologies to anyone that feels they have been left out. Dad, Kathleen, our families, natural and extended, our distinguished alumni, Ed McDowell, Sid and Marion Gale, Don Ament, Paul Mayberry, John Brookfield, Mark Elrod, Charlie Childs, Paul Smith, Hank Clune, Mike Weiss, Juanita and Les Jensen, Mike Berkey, and Dennis Reen, God rest his soul. The 2nd Maryland Fife and Drum, Saxton's Cornet Band, Nicky Hughes, my good friend Tim Holmes, John Estock, Al Robertson, dear friends, Melinda Day, John King, Dennis Fry, Paul Childs, Catherine Bergaw, John Lasher, Bill Aldrich, Evangelina Rubalcava, our good friend Bill McIntosh, Ron Palm, Randy Bartley, Ken Burkett, Carol Ann and Don Schmidt, and who could forget the dance master, Philip Troll. And all those that you see on this stage, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Paul Rode, Mr. Bob Scummai, Dr. Kevin Eisensmith, Dr. Don Robertson, Dr. Rod Sauerwein, Jeremy Shirey, Jason Krakota, J.R. McFerrin, Galen Moore, Luke Hamilton, Kenton Scott, Fred Montanaro. Who's next over there? Sherman Good, Tom Strong, Ted Kramer, Scott Neuro, Bruno Pino, Mr. James Roach, Rob Dalby, Nick McFerrin, Jeff Miller, Robert Murphy. Did I get them all? Ladies and gentlemen, the Wildcat Regiment Band. Maybe we ought to just quit while we're ahead. I also need to ask a favor of our esteemed alumni, and please don't fight me on this, but during this next segment, when you hear Yankee Doodle, you better be making your way to the stage, because we want you to sing with us and the audience, America. But alumni, we want you up on the stage with us. So when you hear the Yankee Doodle begin, you make your way to this stage. One last order of business before we start the sequence, and that is to officially dismiss and muster out the Wildcat Regiment Band from service. It's time to go home. I can't thank them enough, both on stage and those of you in the audience, for giving of your time and your talent, your energy all these years. But now it's time to close the chapter. Gentlemen, you are officially dismissed.
3 cheers for the Wildcat!